In this video, I want to discuss the two different types of data and the data philosophies. Anytime you deal with data, you're dealing with things somewhat on a spectrum, but more or less discretely blocked into Platonic and Aristotelian categories. People rightly say that all the Western philosophy is split up into either Platonic or Aristotelian categories, or more formally stated as all of Western philosophy is just a footnote to Plato and Aristotle. I see more formally because it's actually a quote from somebody somewhere. Don't know. In any case, when dealing in software engineering, you're just an applied philosopher. When you're doing infrastructure architecture, and I do think architecture implies infrastructure, and if you're using the word architecture without an infrastructure, you're just a fancy software developer. When you're dealing with this, you're dealing with applied philosophy, and you're pulling from Platonic and Aristotelian categories, and this is what I mean by this. In the realm of Plato, we have these things called universals. These universals might be whiteness, blackness, furriness, or scaliness. And in this realm, or whatever you want to call it, you have maybe I'm not going to try to draw. I'm just going to draw a circle. A cat. And the cat may participate in whiteness and furriness. And another cat, C1, C2, may participate in blackness and furriness. And then some snake just participates in scaliness and probably some other things. Well, these are universals up here. These are particulars. So in Platonic philosophy, you have the realm of abstract. Then you have the, you might call concrete. Alright? So the abstract gets concretized, whatever you want to say it. Or the abstract becomes instantiated. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? We actually take that terminology right into object orientation. So you have either an abstract class, which becomes slightly less abstract, into a class, but even then, that class is what's abstract, so our terminology is kind of weird. But the class is what's abstract, and the object is concrete. Things like that. But you can easily see how this translates into databases. In this realm, we have something that is akin to a schema. This is our schema. Boy, that looks like a Disney font, doesn't it? Anyways, we have our schema, and that might instantiate as rows. So we have our schema outside of our rows, and this is the basis of all Platonic anything. So if we're dealing with code, we're dealing with C#, we're dealing with Java, we're dealing with database, we're dealing with SQL, which has a schema. And of course, this bottom is bound by the upper. In philosophy, this is called the problem of universals. Well, another way to deal with this is to have a whole other paradigm, a completely other paradigm, where you have your cat. And then in the cat, you study the cat, and you get off it this whiteness and then this catness, right? And then in this particular example, you'll actually have your taxonomical charts and all this stuff of species, family, and all this stuff, and I don't even remember them all. But there's this whole thing where we study things and create these categories, and some people, and I think it's a misguided attempt at scholarship, call this the basis of the scientific method. When in fact there are many elements of Platonism that come right into modern science as well. So it's not as simple as you'd see in a ridiculous book like The Cave and the Light, which it was very hard to get through, written by Arthur Herman. The guy oversimplified Plato and Aristotle to the point where it just didn't make any sense anymore. And by the time you get 25% through the book, he starts talking about people, and it's obvious that he's making stuff up as he goes. It's not even worth your time. But this is the general idea that he talks about. Things are just this simple. Well, in any case, the idea is, though, that your universals are in particulars. You see, so these are universals, this is your particular. So it's somewhat the exact opposite, but even then, it doesn't translate directly, even in terms of reversal. It's a complete different paradigm. And this is why some people would say it's some of the scientific method. You study things, you learn things from them. Whatever. So you study a snake, and then you're going to get scaliness off that, right? Well, if we take this to code, what are we talking about? Obviously, something comes to mind here. I know all of our third grade teachers were able to do this really well, but no, that's not a vase, and that's not two people kissing. That's actually the squiggly thing in JavaScript. So if we take this thing in JavaScript, right, and we take this and we say b equals 2, so there we go. No schema involved. But if we look at it, we can get a schema from it. We can now study this and say b is an integer, right? I don't like abbreviations. They don't make any sense to me. So b is an integer. All right, so we get our universals from our particulars. Bad circle. So in databases, you might think of something like Mongo. Now, I personally have never seen anybody on this planet ever put a document into a document database, and I know of nobody who splits documents into properties, so the term document database means absolutely nothing to me. And this whole bigoted idea of no SQL that somebody tried to say with not only SQL is absolutely ridiculous, because what we're talking about is Aristotelian philosophy. We're talking about Aristotelian data structures. So whenever I create a project, inevitably I'm going to have the project name, maybe something called data is the next part, it's part of my assembly. Inevitably I'm going to have a project that's going to say dot Aristotle. And what this is going to be my provider layer that may actually point off to Azure table storage or Mongo. So I'll program against the interfaces here. I don't care about this, that's fine. I'm going to program to some sort of interfaces in here, which is Aristotle, blah, 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 so that I can just plug in an Azure or a Mongo backend. You can do the same type of thing with a Plato. I don't generally do that because I only ever deal with SQL Server at that end, but I do keep a foot in the Linux world, and I use MySQL over there. And I'm an old school Linux guy, so I'm from the era when people got offended when you said MySQL. Nowadays, everybody says it's MySQL. But use MySQL and SQL Server. Generally speaking, I don't mix them within the same project, so I don't do like .plato. But I could. That is something that is possible. But with these Aristotelian structures, I do go back and forth between Mongo and Azure a lot. Mongo, if I have it just set up and it's available, I'll whip it out. Azure, it's darn near free anyways. If you can't afford Azure table storage, you need to stop watching this video right now, because it's going to cost you more to watch this video than Azure. In terms of your ISP and bandwidth and all that nonsense. I don't know. This is a small video. Can't be that big. But anyways, that's the basic idea between the Platonic and Aristotelian data structures. And as you can see, even this is somewhat of not only a footnote, but somewhat of a commentary on Plato and Aristotle.